my big sister and I were, abused for 10 years throughout our childhood, from 2 to 12 years old. And I think that kind of started the spiral of just really sin and darkness in our lives. Yeah. And, in ways that it felt so normal, so we didn't even recognize a lot of it in the paths that we were going down because it felt natural.
Yeah. And that experience of being abused, that came at the hand of a close family friend, a predator who had, found their way into your family, likely to do what they were doing. And out of that experience too, yes, there was this spiraling and these decisions you later made, but there was also this incredible weight of shame and self-loathing and PTSD happening inside of you. For somebody who might be wondering what that looks like inside of someone who's being abused, what is that like?
Yeah, well, I think it can look different, for everyone, for sure. For me, it was, intense anxiety. I would have reoccurring nightmares and flashbacks of, real life situations that had happened, just continuing to play in my life. In my sleep, I was, suicidal on and off. And yeah, and especially at that age too, you don't really know any resources to go to. And especially when there's that shame aspect of it, it's easier to keep it hidden. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you got a bit older, you're around 12 years old, your sister's around 14, and this person has left your life in some way. But now your sister and you are struggling with this weight, and you're both carrying this. And your sister comes to you, her name's Abby, and she says, Bryn, I've got something that can take all this pain away. And she brings something forward into your life.
Yeah, so, and that really was the heart behind it. It wasn't like, oh, look, here are drugs, let's go be bad and rebellious. And it was really, I found something that helps. You're not gonna feel this pain anymore. You're gonna feel numb and you're gonna forget. And that's all I really wanted. And so at 12 and, my sister at 14, we started using together. And at 12, it was, drinking, smoking weed, and even as far as cocaine.
This is like self-medicating, and it's a way to survive, really, right? Because you're trying to numb yourself. And yet it started to impact your mental health, the drug use.
Yeah.
And that took you to a very dark place.
Yeah, my struggle with mental health was, it was really scary. And I dealt with depression. I thought it was a chemical imbalance that I had, that I was always gonna be like this, that I was on not just like street drugs, but medications from doctors and things. And I thought that was gonna be the rest of my life, was trying to balance medications and figure out what works and what doesn't, and how can I be like a normal person and thrive in the world. And like the suicidal tendencies and the thoughts and feelings around that, it just continued to like kind of go back and forth, throughout that period.
And it's so awful because when you look at like the weight of the darkness of the things that happened to you, and then the spiral that comes out of that, and it's a common story for people where they get to a place after being abused or hurt, and they begin to hurt themselves inadvertently, and they spiral into this sense of hopelessness. And you did try rehab, and you tried these things, and so did your sister. And one time though at rehab, through a connection with a counselor, you made this super brave call to your dad, and you told him the truth.
That call to my dad that day, it was heartbreaking, because I wanted to approach it in a way that showed that I still loved him, but at the same time, I was so angry about everything that had happened. I didn't know how to forgive. I didn't know what it would look like to move forward out of that trauma or to not be affected by it anymore. And he handled it so well. I'm like, he made it a lot easier for me to be able to be open with him and to share with him, but it was definitely a scary day.
Very scary, and a step towards freedom. And to hear your father's response, that he had a response that was positive for you, is really powerful. Really powerful. Your sister Abby struggled just like you, and maybe even more so in some ways. And, as you two are struggling with not feeling like you fit in places and, feeling like misfits, and you're carrying this weight on your shoulders, you fall in with this crowd, and they're in Toronto, and, you think they're your friends. But one day something really terrible happens. Do you mind sharing about that with us right now?
Yeah, for sure. Me and my sister, especially as we got older, we became best friends. So I was with her every single day. We had gone through a lot of the same trauma. She had been through a lot more than me at that time too. And So I felt like she was the only person I could talk to or share with that understood me and that wouldn't judge me or make me feel different because of those things. And the problem with that was that our friends were the drug dealers, the gang members, pimps, prostitutes. And I always had this thought that, oh, if the people that do bad things cared about me and loved me, then the bad things wouldn't happen to me. And we kind of both were on that page. And obviously that's not true at all. And it sucks that I had to learn that the hard way. When I was 18, my sister was 20. She was actually murdered by friends, right? And so that was definitely a tough learning about, okay, like who am I surrounding myself with? Who am I letting in? Who am I trusting? And it was definitely the biggest and most painful loss of my life.
Tell me a little bit more about the state of your life after you lost your sister.
It was like the darkest point of my life, and especially having my person gone, the one that I went to with everything. I was trying to navigate through life myself and not doing a great job. I would wake up every day in the morning actually screaming and crying, realizing that I was still alive, that I had to live through another day. I was insanely depressed. I was really suicidal. I couldn't control my emotions at all. It was almost like I reverted back to like a child. I would pull out my hair, I would punch walls. I picked fights with everyone in my life. It was really hard to be my family. It was really hard to be my friend at that time.
Do you think about the layered trauma of what you've experienced in life at that stage, that you would feel totally out of control like that? But your father, this man of deep faith, and even though, the burden he carries for what happened to you guys, but he had a different response to your sister's death in the sense that he started to feel like she was with God and she was safe finally, and she was out of her own torment. And you watched his faith, you watched how strong he was in his faith throughout this grief process, and it sparked this curiosity in you. Tell me a little bit more about how this spiritual journey started for you.
Yeah, well, at first it sparked anger because I didn't understand it, like peace that surpasses understanding. I didn't get it, and it made me angry. I was like, how can you be so at peace right now? Like, what is going on here? And I thought he just didn't care. Because I didn't understand who God is. I didn't understand, the Holy Spirit in him. And so he just started inviting me to prayer meetings, into rooms with prophetic people and all these kinds of things. And I usually said no. But when I did say yes, I would go usually really high, walk into these rooms of all these people, that he's close with, that he respects and cares about. And they would try to pray for me. They would prophesy over my life about who I am and what the Lord has for me. And I would get so angry again because I was like, do you see me right now? Like, I'm dying. I was literally wasting away from drugs. And I would get so angry that they saw these things in me. And I also didn't understand hearing the voice of God. So I was like, you're all just crazy, kind of. And usually I'd get so mad that I would end up cussing everyone out, slamming the door, and going home. And even with that response and reaction, he continued to invite me in. And eventually he brought me to a deliverance session. And I thought it sounded a little bit crazy, but I agreed to it because honestly I had nothing to lose. I was like, if it doesn't work, I'm in the same place. And if it works, cool, that's awesome. And this woman literally just started speaking to me, pretty much just speaking all the trauma out loud that I had been through that I had never told anyone yet. And I was like, how did you know that? Who told you that? She was like, God, he wants to heal you today. And I was like, okay, there's something to this because this isn't normal. She would not know any of this about me.
No.
And I went back to my apartment that night and had my first encounter with God. Literally, I just knocked over in the middle of my apartment, just on the floor, shaking and sobbing for an hour, just thanking God for showing up for me.
Bryn, what would you say to the person right now who's saying, I feel in bondage to things that have happened to me, to what I've done, to an addiction? What would you say to them right now?
I think just allowing themselves to trust the character and nature of God and just laying it down before him, because we're not supposed to do it on our own. We can't. I tried for so long to do it by myself and to even, try what the world had to offer. And that's not how we were designed. That's not how we were made.
Yeah.
And I think, I think therapy can be great. All of those things, I think they can be super helpful. But partnered with the Holy Spirit, that's where you actually find true freedom. And it's not about us being good enough or strong enough to break out of an addiction or to stop a certain habit or anything like that. But it's us trusting that, you know what, like I am a temple of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit lives inside of me. The strength of Jesus lives inside of me. And so it's not about me anymore, Like, if God can do this, I want to be a part of it.
I want to ask you, as a mom of Gen Z, how do we reach the next generation for Jesus?
Yeah, it's such a cool question. And honestly, I've loved to like dive into it and to pray into it over the past few years, even to look at, how do I reach my friends even?
Yeah.
And how has the church done it that maybe didn't work for me or that I haven't seen working for my generation? And I love that their hearts are for us, and they lead us well. They really do. And so that is such a blessing for us. But I think there's no structure, right? There's no specific structure and this is how Gen Z will all come to Jesus.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing is like pray and fast, like I love that people love Gen Z. I love that people care about my generation and that they're actually fighting for us and that they're going out and doing things to try to reach us. But obviously, like we cannot do anything without being partnered with the Holy Spirit. We need to be Spirit-led. And if we're taking the time to fast and to pray for a generation, like things happen in the Spirit before they happen in the natural. And so that's going to have crazy impacts. Maybe you won't see them or understand them in the moment, but it will be huge. I think also a huge thing is inviting Gen Z in where they're at, because Jesus doesn't tell us to get all fixed up, get perfect, and then we can go to church, and then we can go find him. It's like, no, like allow us to be vulnerable in our brokenness, to come just sit at the feet of Jesus in our sin, in our, helplessness and our hopelessness, because that's how we're actually going to see change. And I know a lot of the time, even my friends, like they feel so uncomfortable going into churches because they're like, oh, but I do this and I do this. And I'm like, so this is the perfect place for you then. Like, come.
So good. Such great points, Bryn. And, I know some of your old friends, you've come back, you're visiting them. They're coming to faith in Jesus. You've got your friends getting baptized right around now. It's incredible. Bryn, it's so amazing to see what God is doing in your life. You are a young leader among young leaders. And I'm so thankful that you've been with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.